He stood at the academy gates in a clean suit and coal-stained hands, but they told him he didn't belong. What they didn't know was that a decorated general was about to show them what dignity really looks like. Welcome to Dusk Tales. Let's uncover what really happened. The late May sun beat down on the meticulously manicured lawns of the Blackwood Preparatory Academy, a bastion of privilege nestled in the rolling hills of what was once coal country. Arthur Jenkins, 58 years old, shifted uncomfortably in his best and only suit, a dark, slightly outdated serge that smelled faintly of mothballs and the stubborn, ingrained scent of earth that no amount of scrubbing could fully eradicate. His hands, calloused and permanently stained with the black dust of the mines, felt rough against the crisp, white invitation he clutched. Today his son, Michael, was graduating. Not just graduating, but graduating with honors, a scholarship to a prestigious university already secured. Arthur's heart swelled with a pride so immense it almost choked him. This was it. This was the culmination of a lifetime of backbreaking labor, of sacrifices whispered into the darkness of the coal seams, of dreams deferred so that Michael could have a future beyond the suffocating blackness that had claimed generations of Jenkins men. He approached the grand, ivy-covered entrance to the academy's main hall, a place that felt as alien to him as the surface of the moon. Two young men in sharply creased blazers, their hair perfectly coiffed, stood guard at the doors, checking invitations with an air of bored authority. They looked like they'd never seen a day of real dirt in their lives. Arthur offered his invitation, his calloused hand trembling slightly. "Arthur Jenkins," he said, his voice a low rumble, still carrying the timbre of the deep earth. "For Michael Jenkins' graduation." The first guard, a blond youth with a name tag reading Chad, took the invitation with two delicate fingers, as if it might soil them. He barely glanced at it, his eyes instead flicking dismissively over Arthur's worn suit, the faint but undeniable grime under his fingernails, the lines etched onto his face not by age alone, but by decades of relentless, unforgiving labor. Jenkins, Chad muttered, making a show of consulting a sleek tablet. He exchanged a look with his companion, a smirking young man named Bryce. "Doesn't look like you're on the priority access list, sir." The "sir" was coated in a thin veneer of condescension. Arthur frowned. "Priority access? My boy, Michael, he's an honor graduate. This is his invitation." Bryce stepped forward, puffing out his chest slightly. "Yes, well, the priority list is for benefactors, board members, distinguished alumni. Perhaps you're in the general seating? Though," he added, his gaze lingering on Arthur's hands, "there is a dress code. We do try to maintain a certain standard at Blackwood." The implication was clear, a stinging slap of indignity. Arthur felt a slow burn of anger begin in his gut, an old, familiar feeling he'd had to swallow countless times. He thought of the 16-hour shifts, the constant danger, the lung-searing dust, all endured so Michael could walk these hallowed halls, could sit amongst the sons and daughters of men who probably owned the very minds that were slowly killing him. "My suit is clean," Arthur said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And this invitation grants me entry. My son is expecting me." Chad sighed theatrically. "Look, we have our instructions. If you're not on the list, you can't go through this entrance. There's an alternative entrance around the back for general attendees and staff. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable there." The suggestion that he, the father of an honor graduate, be relegated to the staff entrance, as if he were a servant, was a fresh twist of the knife. He saw other parents, men in tailored suits and women in expensive dresses, gliding past, their invitations barely scrutinized, welcomed with polite smiles. The injustice of it was a bitter, choking thing. He was being judged, not by his character, not by his love for his son, but by the dirt on his hands, the weariness on his face, the simple fact that he did not look like he belonged in their rarefied world. But Michael was in there. Michael was waiting. He wouldn't let these two arrogant pups spoil this day. He wouldn't. But how could he get past them without causing a scene, without embarrassing his son on what should be the proudest day of Michael's young life? Welcome to QH. Let's uncover what really happened. Arthur Jenkins was a man who understood hardship, a man whose life had been a testament to quiet endurance. He had faced down rockfalls and collapsing tunnels, breathed air thick enough to cut with a knife, and watched friends succumb to the black lung, all without losing his fundamental decency or his fierce love for his son. But the casual, unthinking cruelty of these two young guards, standing as gatekeepers to his son's triumph, ignited a different kind of fire within him. A cold, weary anger born of a lifetime of being looked down upon, of being judged by the grime on his hands rather than the strength in his heart. "Listen to me, lads," Arthur said, his voice still low but now laced with an unmistakable authority, the kind of authority that comes not from a uniform or a title, but from a life lived on the very edge of survival. "My son, Michael Jenkins, is graduating today with the highest honors this school can bestow. I have worked every day of my adult life in the deep mines, pulling coal from the earth, so that he could have this chance, so he wouldn't have to follow me down into the dark. This invitation," he held it up, his hand steady despite the tremor of emotion running through him, "is my right to be here, to see him, to share this day. Now, you can check your list again, you can call your supervisor, or you can step aside. But I'm going into that hall." Chad and Bryce exchanged an uneasy glance. Arthur's quiet intensity was more unsettling than any shouted threat. There was a power in him, an ancient, elemental force that their privileged upbringing had not prepared them for. Bryce, however, recovering his composure, puffed up again. "Sir, I've already told you, the priority entrance is restricted. We have our orders. If you create a disturbance, I'll have to call campus security." "A disturbance?" Arthur's laugh was short and humorless. "Son, you would know a real disturbance if it caved in on top of you. I am Michael Jenkins' father, and I will not be treated like a second-class citizen at his graduation. Now, are you going to make a call? Or do I need to find someone with a bit more sense than the two of you?" Just then, Mrs. Eleanor Ainsworth, a prominent local philanthropist and a major donor to Blackwood, swept towards the entrance, dripping in pearls and Chanel. Chad and Bryce practically tripped over themselves to greet her, their earlier arrogance replaced by fawning obsequiousness. "Mrs. Ainsworth, so good to see you. Right this way. Your seat is reserved, of course." She gave Arthur a cursory, dismissive glance as she passed, her nose wrinkling slightly as if she'd smelled something unpleasant. The blatant hypocrisy was almost too much for Arthur to bear. He saw red for a moment, the years of swallowed pride, of silent endurance, threatening to erupt. But then he thought of Michael. He had to stay calm. He had to find another way. He noticed a side door, slightly ajar, further down the ivy-covered wall. Staff were occasionally slipping in and out. Perhaps it was undignified. It felt like a betrayal of his own right to be there as an honored guest. But the ceremony would be starting soon. The strains of the school orchestra tuning up were audible even from outside. Michael would be wondering where he was. With a heavy heart, Arthur began to move towards the side door, a bitter taste in his mouth. He, who had given everything for his son to be here, was now reduced to sneaking in like an intruder, all because of the calluses on his hands and the cut of his suit. He felt a profound weariness settle over him, a sadness that went deeper than the immediate insult. It was the sadness of a world that so often valued appearance over substance, privilege over hard-won merit. As he reached the side door, a stern voice called out, "Excuse me, sir. Where do you think you're going?" It was Bryce, swaggering over, Chad trailing behind him, both looking smug. "That entrance is for authorized personnel only. I thought we made that clear." Arthur turned, his patience worn thin. "I'm trying to see my son graduate," he said, his voice hoarse with suppressed emotion. "You have left me no other choice." "No choice," Chad sneered. "You have a choice to follow the rules, like everyone else. Or you can choose to be escorted off the premises." He reached for a walkie-talkie on his belt. Arthur stood his ground. He had faced down far worse than these two overinflated popinjays. But the thought of Michael, he couldn't bear the thought of his son's day being ruined by a public confrontation, by his father being dragged away by security. The injustice was a vice around his chest, squeezing the air from his lungs. What value was there in a world where a father's love and sacrifice could be so casually dismissed by the superficial judgment of two ignorant boys? Inside the grand auditorium, Michael Jenkins scanned the rows of expectant faces from his seat on the stage, a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. His father wasn't in the reserved seats designated for the families of honor graduates. He wasn't anywhere Michael could see. His dad, Arthur, was the most punctual man he knew. A lifetime spent adhering to the rigid schedules of mind shifts had ingrained it in him. For him to be late today, of all days, was unthinkable. A cold dread began to seep into Michael's heart. Had something happened? An accident on the drive over? His father wasn't in the best of health. Decades in the coal mines had taken their toll on his lungs, his joints. Michael tried to push the dark thoughts away, tried to focus on the opening remarks being made by Headmaster Albright, a portly man whose voice boomed with practiced oratory. But the words were a meaningless drone. His mind was outside, searching for his father. He remembered the immense pride in his father's eyes when Michael had told him about the scholarship, about being named valedictorian. Arthur hadn't said much. He rarely did when emotions ran high, but his calloused hand had rested on Michael's shoulder, a silent testament to a love that needed no words. That hand, stained with the cold dust that represented a lifetime of sacrifice, was the hand that had put food on their table, clothes on his back, and ultimately had paved the way for Michael to sit on this very stage in this very different world. Michael owed everything to his father. The thought of Arthur missing this, of his own triumph being unwitnessed by the one person whose opinion mattered most, was unbearable. He pictured his father in his best suit, the one he wore only for church and special occasions, probably feeling a little out of place amongst the wealthy Blackwood parents, but determined to be there. His father, who had faced down the crushing darkness of the earth day after day, who had risked his life countless times, not for glory or riches, but for his son, a man of quiet dignity, of unshakable integrity. The idea that anything or anyone could prevent Arthur Jenkins from being here today filled Michael with a sudden, fierce anger that momentarily eclipsed his anxiety. Back outside, the standoff continued. Chad had his hand on his walkie-talkie, his finger hovering over the transmit button. Bryce stood with his arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips, clearly enjoying Arthur's distress. "Last chance, old man," Bryce said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Walk away quietly, or we call it in. And trust me, you don't want Blackwood security involved. They don't take kindly to trespassers." Arthur looked from their arrogant faces to the closed doors of the auditorium. He could hear the muffled applause as Headmaster Albright finished his welcome. The ceremony was well underway. His heart ached with a sense of profound injustice and helplessness. He had given his life, his health, for his son to have this moment, and now he was being denied the simple right to witness it, all because he didn't fit their narrow, superficial mold. He thought of appealing to a higher authority, but who and how? These two were the gatekeepers, and they had judged him unworthy. Just as Chad was about to press the button on his radio, a sleek black limousine, the kind that whispered of old money and discreet power, pulled up silently to the curb near the main entrance. The rear door opened, and a figure emerged, a man of such commanding presence that even Chad and Bryce paused, their attention momentarily diverted. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that bespoke Seville row tailoring, his silver hair perfectly cut, his features patrician. He moved with an unhurried grace, an aura of quiet authority surrounding him like an invisible force field. He was instantly recognizable to anyone familiar with the upper echelons of national power. General Alastair Finch, retired, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a decorated war hero, a philanthropist, and, most importantly in this context, a distinguished Blackwood alumnus and the chairman of its Board of Trustees. General Finch's keen blue eyes, accustomed to assessing complex battlefields in a single glance, took in the scene before him. The two flustered guards, the distressed older man in the ill-fitting suit, the tension hanging heavy in the air. He didn't need a tablet or a priority list to understand what was happening. He had seen this kind of petty tyranny, this casual abuse of minor authority in countless outposts around the world, and it always angered him. General Alistair Finch surveyed the scene with an expression that could chill steel. His gaze flickered from the two young guards, Chad and Bryce, whose smugness was rapidly evaporating into a mixture of confusion and dawning apprehension, to Arthur Jenkins, who stood with a quiet, beleaguered dignity that resonated deeply with the old soldier. The general didn't know Arthur, had never met him, but he recognized the look in his eyes, the look of a man who had endured much, who had sacrificed greatly, and who was now being subjected to a needless, petty indignity. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" General Finch's voice was calm, almost gentle, yet it carried an undeniable weight of command that made both Chad and Bryce instinctively straighten up, their earlier arrogance vanishing like mist in the sun. "No, sir. General Finch, sir," Chad stammered, his face flushing crimson. He hadn't recognized the general immediately, but the aura of power was unmistakable, and Bryce's sudden pallor confirmed his dawning horror. Just a routine security check, sir." Bryce, try to recover, chimed in. This gentleman was attempting to gain unauthorized access, sir. He's not on the priority list." General Finch's gaze, sharp and penetrating, turned to Arthur. "And you are, sir?" he asked, his tone respectful, a stark contrast to the guard's earlier insolence. Arthur, momentarily taken aback by the sudden appearance of this distinguished figure, and the deference he clearly commanded, found his voice. "Arthur Jenkins, sir. My son, Michael Jenkins, is graduating today, with honors. This is his invitation." He held it out again, his hand surprisingly steady. General Finch took the invitation, his eyes scanning it briefly before returning to Arthur. He noted the calloused hands, the faint lines of cold dust still visible in the creases of Arthur's skin, the quiet weariness in his eyes that spoke of a lifetime of hard labor. And he saw something else, too, an unyielding strength, a profound, quiet dignity. "Michael Jenkins," General Finch mused aloud, "an exceptional young man. I had the pleasure of reviewing the scholarship applications. His essay on the resilience of the Appalachian spirit, inspired by his father's life in the mines, was particularly moving. A credit to you, Mr. Jenkins." Arthur stared, astonished. This powerful, important man knew of Michael, knew of him. A wave of emotion, so potent it almost buckled his knees, washed over him. Chad and Bryce looked as if they might faint. Their carefully constructed world of lists and priorities was crumbling around them. "So, Mr. Jenkins," General Finch continued, his voice still calm, but with an underlying edge of ice as he turned back to the two guards. "Father of one of our most distinguished graduates, holding a valid invitation, was being denied entry by a list?" Chad swallowed hard. "Sir, our instructions were very clear." "Your instructions," General Finch interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level that was far more intimidating than any shout, "were to ensure the safety and orderly admission of our guests. Your instructions were not, I believe, to act as arbiters of social standing, nor to pass judgment on a man based on the cut of his suit or the profession that has clearly shaped his hands. Hands, I might add," he looked directly at Arthur with profound respect, "that have toiled honestly to provide his son with the very education this institution purports to offer." He paused, letting his words sink in. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant, muffled sounds of the graduation ceremony progressing within the auditorium. "Bryce, was it? And Chad?" General Finch's gaze was now like a laser. "You will escort Mr. Jenkins into the auditorium. You will find him a seat in the front row, amongst the other honored parents. If there are no empty seats, you will politely ask someone to make room. You will do so with the utmost courtesy and respect. And then you will report to Headmaster Albright's office immediately after the ceremony. I believe he and I will have a rather lengthy discussion about Blackwood's admission protocols and the caliber of personnel entrusted with representing this academy. Is that understood?" The two young men, their faces ashen, could only nod mutely, their earlier arrogance completely extinguished, replaced by a very real, very personal terror. They looked at Arthur Jenkins now with a new, horrified understanding. The old man they had so casually dismissed was, it seemed, under the personal protection of the most powerful man associated with the academy. The tables had turned with a speed and finality that was breathtaking. The transformation in Chad and Bryce was instantaneous and absolute. Their earlier insolence vanished, replaced by a fumbling, almost comical eagerness to please. "Yes, sir, General, sir. Right away, sir." Chad stammered, practically snatching the invitation from Arthur's hand, this time handling it as if it were a sacred relic. Bryce, his face a mask of pale contrition, hurried to open the main auditorium doors, which he now held with an exaggerated deference that bordered on the absurd. "Mr. Jenkins, sir, please, after you," Bryce mumbled, avoiding Arthur's gaze, his earlier smirk long gone. Arthur, still trying to process the sudden, dramatic shift in his fortunes, found himself being ushered into the grand hall with an almost reverent haste by the two young men who, just moments before, had been barring his way with such contempt. The auditorium was packed, the ceremony in full swing. Headmaster Albright was at the podium, midway through a lengthy oration on the virtues of a Blackwood education. As Arthur was escorted down the center aisle by the now chastened guards, a ripple of curiosity and surprise went through the assembled parents and faculty. Heads turned, whispers started. Who was this man, arriving late, but being personally escorted to the very front by two sheepish-looking security guards, especially after the doors had been closed for the procession? General Finch followed a few paces behind, his presence a silent, powerful statement. He didn't need to say a word. His very attendance alongside Arthur spoke volumes. Chad and Bryce, true to the general's command, scanned the front rows. Finding them full, Bryce approached a well-dressed couple, leaned in, and whispered something urgently. The couple, recognizing the gravity of the situation, or perhaps simply intimidated by the proximity of General Finch, immediately rose and offered their seats. Arthur found himself seated in the very heart of the auditorium, a place he had been so rudely denied just minutes before. He looked around, dazed, trying to take it all in. He could see Michael on the stage, his son's face lighting up with a mixture of relief and utter astonishment as he caught sight of his father. Michael's eyes flicked from Arthur to General Finch, who gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. A slow smile spread across Michael's face, a smile of pure, unadulterated joy and dawning understanding. His father was here, and somehow, impossibly, he had arrived with an honor guard of one, but an honor guard of immense significance. Headmaster Albright, momentarily flustered by the unexpected interruption and the palpable shift in the room's atmosphere, stumbled over his words before regaining his composure and continuing his speech. But the focus of many in the audience had shifted. They were no longer just listening to the platitudes. They were watching Arthur Jenkins, the man whose arrival had caused such a stir, the man who now sat in the front row under the watchful, respectful gaze of General Alastair Finch. The story of what had happened at the entrance began to circulate in hushed whispers through the rows. The initial denial, the disrespect, and then the dramatic intervention of the chairman of the board. Expressions of disapproval for the guard behavior were quickly followed by murmurs of admiration for Arthur and for the general who had so decisively rectified the injustice. Arthur himself felt a whirlwind of emotions. The sting of the earlier humiliation was still there, but it was now overlaid with a profound sense of gratitude and a dawning realization that perhaps, just perhaps, his quiet life of sacrifice had not gone entirely unnoticed by the wider world, or at least by one very important, very influential man. He thought of the irony. Arthur Jenkins, a coal miner whose hands were more accustomed to a pickaxe than a pen, was now the focus of attention in this hall of privilege, not because of wealth or status, but because of a fundamental act of injustice that had been so publicly and so powerfully set right. General Finch did not take a seat himself. He remained standing discreetly at the back of the front section, a silent, watchful presence, ensuring that Arthur was treated with the respect he deserved for the remainder of the ceremony. His message was clear. This man, Arthur Jenkins, was to be honored. When it was finally Michael Jenkins' turn to deliver his valedictory address, he walked to the podium with a new spring in his step, his earlier anxiety completely gone, replaced by a radiant confidence. He looked out at the audience, his gaze finding his father. Arthur met his son's eyes, and in that shared look, a lifetime of love, sacrifice, and now vindication was communicated. Michael put aside his prepared notes. Michael Jenkins stood at the podium, the weight of the valedictory honor settling upon his young shoulders. But it was a weight made lighter, made joyous by the sight of his father finally in his rightful place. The prepared speech, filled with thoughtful reflections on their Blackwood journey and aspirations for the future, suddenly felt inadequate. The events of the morning, the raw injustice his father had faced, and the extraordinary intervention that had set it right, demanded to be addressed. He took a deep breath, his eyes sweeping over the expectant faces in the auditorium, before settling once more on Arthur. Esteemed faculty, honored guests, proud parents, and fellow graduates. Michael began, his voice clear and steady, resonating with an emotional depth that captivated the entire hall. Today, we celebrate a milestone, a culmination of years of hard work, dedication, and the unwavering support of those who believed in us. I had a speech written for this occasion, a speech about looking to the future. But something happened today, just before this ceremony began, that has profoundly reminded me of the importance of looking at the present, at the values we truly uphold, and at the character of the people who shape our lives. A hush fell over the auditorium. This was not the standard valedictory address. There was an intensity in Michael's voice, a gravitas that commanded attention. Arthur felt his heart swell with a mixture of pride and apprehension. What was his boy about to say? "My father," Michael continued, his voice ringing with a fierce, protective love, "Arthur Jenkins is here today." He gestured towards Arthur, who sat, a humble figure in his worn suit, the object of hundreds of curious and now deeply respectful gazes. "My father is a coal miner. For over 40 years, he has descended into the darkness of the earth, into danger and hardship, to pull from it the resources that have, in many ways, fueled the very privileges that allow an institution like Blackwood Academy to exist. He has done this not for himself, but for me, so that I could have a different life, a life of opportunity, a life beyond the coal dust that has claimed the health and shortened the lives of so many in our community." Tears, WL, Michael's voice thick with emotion, but unwavering. "His hands," Michael said, his gaze sweeping over the affluent crowd, many of whom had likely never considered the origin of their comforts, "are stained with the honest labor of a lifetime. His lungs bear the scars of his sacrifice. His suit may not be from a fancy tailor, but it is worn with the dignity of a man who has given everything for his son." General Finch, standing at the back, nodded slowly, his expression one of profound approval. Chad and Bryce, had they been present, would have wished the earth to swallow them whole. This morning, Michael's voice hardened slightly. "My father," holding a valid invitation to see his son graduate as valedictorian, was met with disrespect at the doors of this academy. He was judged by his appearance, by the calluses on his hands. He was told he didn't belong, that he wasn't on the priority list. He was almost denied entry to witness the proudest moment of my life, a moment made possible solely by his unceasing labor and love. A shocked murmur rippled through the audience. Many parents exchanged horrified glances. The story that had been whispered was now being laid bare from the podium by the school's top graduate. Headmaster Albright looked acutely uncomfortable, his face flushed. "But my father," Michael declared, his voice soaring with pride, "is a man of immense strength and quiet dignity. He endured this insult, as he has endured so many others in his life, without complaint, concerned only that he might miss this day." And then Michael's gaze shifted to General Finch, a true leader, a man of genuine honor. General Alastair Finch intervened. He saw an injustice, and he did not stand by. He understood that a man's worth is not measured by his bank account or his social standing, but by his character, his integrity, and his sacrifices. The applause began then, tentative at first, then swelling into a thunderous ovation, not just for Michael, but for Arthur, and for the general who had stood for him. Arthur Jenkins, the coal miner, sat with tears streaming down his weathered face, not tears of shame or sorrow, but tears of overwhelming pride, of love, and of a profound, unexpected vindication. He had only ever wanted what was best for his son. He had never imagined that his son, in his moment of triumph, would use that platform to honor him, to defend his dignity, to teach this assembly of the privileged a lesson about true worth. The standing ovation continued for a full minute, a heartfelt outpouring of emotion that transcended the usual polite applause of a graduation ceremony. Michael waited, his composure steadfast, though his own eyes were suspiciously bright. When the applause finally subsided, he continued, his voice softer now, but no less powerful. The lesson here today, fellow graduates, the lesson I hope we all take with us as we leave Blackwood, is not just about academic achievement. It's about empathy. It's about looking beyond the surface. It's about recognizing the inherent dignity in every human being, regardless of their profession, their appearance, or their perceived status. It's about understanding that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in the sacrifices we make for those we love. He looked directly at his father. Dad, everything I am, everything I have achieved, I owe to you. Your hands may carry the dust of the mine, but they're the strongest, kindest, most honorable hands I know. You are my hero. This diploma, this honor, it's as much yours as it is mine. Arthur could only nod, his throat too tight for words, his heart overflowing. Around him, he saw other parents dabbing their eyes, moved by the raw honesty and profound love in Michael's tribute. General Finch's stern features had softened into a warm, appreciative smile. This young man, he thought, was a true credit to his father, a testament to the values Arthur Jenkins had clearly instilled. So, as we go forth, Michael concluded, his voice ringing with youthful idealism and newfound wisdom, let us strive to build a world where a man like my father is judged not by the dirt on his hands, but by the love in his heart and the strength of his character. Let us be the generation that looks deeper, that values substance over show, that champions the quiet, unsung heroes who toil in the shadows to make our lives brighter. Thank you. Another wave of applause, even more fervent this time, swept through the hall. Michael stepped back from the podium, the relief and emotion evident on his face. He had spoken his truth, defended his father, and in doing so had delivered a message far more impactful than any standard valedictory address. Headmaster Albright, when he returned to the podium to continue the ceremony, looked visibly humbled. His subsequent remarks were brief, his usual booming confidence replaced by a more measured, reflective tone. The rest of the graduation proceeded, but the emotional core of the event had been irrevocably defined by Michael's speech and the silent, powerful drama that had preceded it. After the diplomas were awarded and the tassels turned, a throng of students, parents, and faculty members surrounded Michael, congratulating him not just on his academic achievements, but on his courage and eloquence. But Michael's first priority was his father. He pushed through the well-wishers and enveloped Arthur in a fierce hug. "I'm so proud of you, Dad," Michael whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "No, son." Arthur managed his own voice choked. "I'm so proud of you." General Finch approached them, his hand extended to Arthur. "Mr. Jenkins," he said, his voice filled with genuine warmth, "your son is an extraordinary young man. You have raised him well. It was an honor to witness that speech, and an even greater honor to have played a small part in ensuring you were here to hear it." "General," Arthur said, his grip firm, "I don't know how to thank you. You didn't have to." "Nonsense, Arthur," the general said, using his first name with easy familiarity. "Some things are not negotiable. Respect for a good man, a hardworking father, is one of them. What those young guards did was an embarrassment to this institution. An institution, I might add, that was built on foundations laid by men like you, men who understood the value of hard work and sacrifice. He then turned to Michael. Young man, your father has given you a great legacy. Use it wisely, and never forget the lessons of this day. The Blackwood Academy graduation of that year was remembered not for the distinguished guest speakers or the lavish reception that followed, but for the coal miner's son who spoke truth to power, and for the quiet, dignified father whose worth was finally, and so dramatically, acknowledged. It became a story told and retold, a lesson in humility, respect, and the enduring power of a father's love and a son's loyalty. The aftermath of the graduation ceremony was significant. Headmaster Albright, under considerable pressure from General Finch and a newly galvanized Board of Trustees, issued a formal, public apology to Arthur Jenkins. Chad and Bryce were summarily dismissed, their brief careers as arbiters of Blackwood's social strata coming to an ignominious end. More importantly, the Academy undertook a serious review of its policies and staff training, particularly concerning guest relations and sensitivity. General Finch, true to his word, personally oversaw some of these changes, ensuring that Blackwood's commitment to inclusivity and respect became more than just words in a brochure. Arthur Jenkins, who had arrived at Blackwood feeling like an outsider, left it a figure of quiet renown. He hadn't sought the attention, but he bore it with the same humble dignity he had carried through his life. He was approached by several local newspapers, and even a regional television station wanted to do a human interest story, but he politely declined, saying only, "My boy Michael, he's the real story. He's the one with the bright future." However, his son's heartfelt tribute had an unexpected consequence. A group of Blackwood alumni, many of whom came from working-class backgrounds themselves or whose families had ties to the region's mining history, were deeply moved by Michael's speech and Arthur's story. They came together and established the Arthur Jenkins Legacy Scholarship, a fund dedicated to helping underprivileged students from Appalachian communities attend Blackwood Preparatory Academy. It was their way of honoring Arthur's sacrifice and ensuring that other deserving students, regardless of their parents' professions or financial means, would have the same opportunities Michael had earned. Arthur, when informed of the scholarship named in his honor, was overwhelmed. I just dug coal," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I never thought my life could mean something like this to other folks." General Finch, who had quietly spearheaded the alumni initiative, clapped him on the shoulder. "Arthur," he said, "the coal you dug powered a nation. The son you raised will undoubtedly contribute greatly to its future. And the dignity with which you have lived your life has inspired more people than you know. That is a legacy worth celebrating." Michael, of course, went on to university, excelling in his studies, his father's example a constant source of inspiration. He never forgot the lessons of his graduation day, the importance of standing up for what is right, of challenging injustice, and of honoring the quiet, unsung heroes who form the true backbone of society. He often returned to his Appalachian hometown, not with pity, but with respect and a desire to give back to the community that had shaped him. Arthur continued to live his quiet life, but it was different now. The faint scent of coal dust still clung to him, a reminder of his past, but it was no longer a mark of shame or a reason for others to look down on him. It was a badge of honor, a testament to a life of hard labor, sacrifice, and unwavering love. He would often visit the small park in his town, the one with the memorial to fallen miners, and sit on a bench watching the children play. Sometimes parents would approach him, having heard his story, and thank him for his hard work, for raising such a fine son, for reminding them of the dignity of labor and the importance of respect. Arthur Jenkins never became a wealthy man, nor did he achieve worldly fame. But in the hearts of his son, his community, and those who had witnessed the extraordinary events of that graduation day, he was a giant, a quiet hero whose worth, once obscured by the dust of the mines, now shone brightly for all to see. And it all began because he simply wanted to see his son graduate, a testament to the enduring truth that a father's love and the fight for basic human dignity can indeed move mountains Or, in this case, silence a room and change a venerable institution for the better. If you believe that every individual, regardless of their station in life, deserves respect and that the sacrifices of hardworking parents are the bedrock of our future, type dignity in the comments below. Subscribe to QH Incredible Stories, where we honor the unsung heroes and celebrate the moments when true worth is finally and triumphantly recognized.